Left foot jab, right hand between the legs, and then you switch. Jab, between the legs, jab, between the legs, jab, between the legs. Now we have left foot jab, right hand between the legs and behind the back, and you keep going the same way. So left jab, right between the legs, behind the back. Left jab, right hand between the legs, behind the back. Now we have the same thing, but we're going the other way with the right foot jab. And each of these drills, you go to half court and back. Now we're back to a right foot jab, open up, left hand between the legs, double behind the back, and we switch. So jab, open up, between the legs, behind the back, switch. Open up, switch. Jab, open up, between, behind, and we go through. This one is a jab, between the legs, behind the back, crossing back over, and then we keep switching our jab foot. So there, between the legs, behind the back, cross, switch. There, between the legs, behind the back, cross, then switch jab foot. Now we have stationary 2 dribbles between the legs back to the same hand. When we do all these drills, we do it stationary, and then we do it to half court and back for starting with this drill. Now we have 1 dribble between the legs, back to the same hand, stationary. Now once you get that down, you do it with no dribbles. And again, for these drills, we do them stationary, and then we walk to half court and back. We start on the baseline and do 2 dribbles between the legs, walk into half court, 1 dribble, and then eventually what we want to do is get to no dribble, as you'll see here in a second. Now we're alternating, we're going between the legs, then behind the back, and we're switching hands. So we go left between the legs, back to the same hand, right between the legs, back to the same hand, and behind the back. Now we have 1 dribble, left hand between the legs, double behind the back, and we keep going the same way. So left hand between the legs, double behind the back. Left hand between the legs, double behind the back. Now we're switching ways. So we go 1 dribble, right hand between the legs, double behind the back. 1 dribble, right hand between the legs, double behind the back. This one's called walk the dog. So you really have to exaggerate it with your wrists, and we're walking to half court, and then we're walking backwards when we go to the baseline. So we come up to half and then walk backwards when we go back to the baseline. Now we have 1 dribble, right hand crossover, and then between the legs, and we go the same way. So 1 dribble, right crossover, between the legs. Right crossover, back between the legs. Right crossover, back between the legs. Switch. So left hand crossover, right back between the legs, and we keep going. And again, we go to half court and back with all these drills. So now we have 1 dribble, right hand cross, between the legs, behind the back, and we keep going the same way. So 1 dribble, right hand cross, between the legs, behind the back, and we go the same way the whole time. Half court and back. Now we have the same thing, but we switch it. So 1 dribble, left hand crossover, between legs, behind the back, and we go the same way to half court and back. Now for the next one, this is the hardest one. We're going to go no dribble, crossover between the legs, behind the back, but the same ball is going to cross between the legs, behind the back. So we're switching ways. So the same ball stays in front, and the same ball goes cross between behind, and we walk to half court and back. At each cone, we have 1 dribble between the legs, change directions. Then we have 1 dribble between the legs for the move, keep the dribble alive, and we finish at the rim. After this, we have rhythm inside outs. And again, the video messed up, but you'll start with crossover at each cone, and you'll go twice. And then you have between the legs at each cone, and you go twice. Then you have behind the back. So 1 dribble behind the back, get there, 1 dribble behind the back, keep your dribble alive, finish. And on these inside outs, it's really important to focus on the rhythm. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and really try to maintain that rhythm. Now we have reverse between the legs at each cone. When we get there, reverse between the legs, keep the dribble alive, finish, and really focus on the rhythm with these inside outs. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's how I want you to maintain that rhythm. Now we have freestyle at each cone, so you can do a crossover between the legs or behind the back or reverse between the legs. Any of the moves that we did, and then you got the same rhythm coming back. So for the full workout, you would go crossover at each cone and do that twice, then between the legs, behind the back, reverse, and then freestyle, and you have 2 of each. Now we get to each cone, we have a between the legs, behind the back. On that behind the back, I want you to get away from the defender. Then when we get to the 3-point line, again, between the legs. On that behind the back, I want you to get away from the defender. And now we have between the legs rhythm hops. So I really want you, again, when you go between the legs, to hop with it and really, really be slowed down and feel a rhythm with it. Now eventually we have the same thing, but we have no dribbles between the legs, behind the back, away. Then we have between the legs and behind the back, away. So it's not just a regular behind the back. I want you to do the between the legs and then get away from the defender on the behind the back. And then we have rhythm hops on the way back. Now we have cross between the legs, behind the back. The outside hand is always going to be the one that crosses first. So you have, each time you get to the cone, the outside hand crosses, then you have between the legs, behind the back, and then you go. Every time the outside hand at each cone is the first hand to cross over, and then between the legs, behind the back. Now we have a jab, between the legs, inside out. Jab, the outside hand's always going between the legs, the inside hand's doing the in and out. So we have a jab, open up, between the legs, in and out. Then we have an in and out, whatever you want to do, finish, and we're back to the same rhythm hops. Now we have a crossover between the legs at each cone. Again, the outside hand's always crossing over, and then you go between the legs, and then you got a between the legs crossover when you get to the 3-point line. And when you have the 2 balls, once you get to the 3-point line, I want you to try to do the combo move like you would in the game. And in this, we have the same thing, but behind the back rhythm hops. So now we have crossover behind the back at each cone. Again, the outside hand's always crossing. And we have behind the back, cross, behind the back. Try to make a game like cross, behind the back, away. Keep the dribble alive, finish. And then we have the same thing